It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, Algeria has banned French aircraft from crossing its airspace to intervene in Niger, while Morocco has accepted the use of its airspace. The African Union, which opposes the idea of a military intervention, has announced the suspension of Niger from all its organizations, institutions, and expressed caution at a possible military intervention by the Economic Community of West African States. The summit meeting of the so-called BRICS group has opened in Johannesburg to examine political and economic issues and the extension of the group to include new members. Hello and welcome on Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Osmani. Algeria has banned French aircraft from crossing its airspace to intervene in Niger, while Morocco has accepted. France has threatened Niger's military leaders to conduct a military operation if they don't set free President Mohamed Bazoum. Confirmed sources said that the military intervention was planned as all military means are set up. Algeria has always rejected the use of force, and its response regarding the use of force in Niger is firm and clear. Facing Algeria's rejection, France got Morocco's approval to use its airspace for France's military aircraft. With its favorable response to France, Morocco has proven once again that it is a colonizing state that violates international legality and supports military interventions in a free and independent country. Meanwhile, political analyst and professor at Sevilla University in Spain, Bashir Mohamed Lahsen, has labeled Morocco's offer to open its airspace to French aircraft as unrealistic.
First of all, it's unrealistic that the French military aircraft cross the airspace of Morocco, then Western Sahara, then Mauritania, then Mali to arrive in Niger. So, with regard to the cost of such a journey, I think this is unrealistic. But I think that Morocco has offered its airspace to France aircrafts as a reaction to Algeria's rejection.
That was political analyst and professor at Sevilla University in Spain, Bashir Mohamed Lahsen. As you followed in our top stories, the African Union has announced, or the African Union, which opposes the idea of a military intervention, has announced the suspension of Niger from all the organizations, institutions, and expressed caution at a possible military intervention by the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, as Yabika reports.
In a communique issued in Addis Ababa, the AU Peace and Security Council expressed reservations as saying it takes note of the ECOWAS decision to deploy force in Niger. In this respect, it requested from the AU Commission to undertake an assessment of the security, social and implication such deployment will have. The new mission recently carried out by the members of the ECOWAS delegation to try and defuse the crisis has failed to produce any results. Earlier, the ECOWAS said it rejected as unacceptable the 3-year-long transition proposed by Niger's new leaders and stressed that the period must be very short and even shorter than 1 year, while recalling that the option of a military action was still considered by the ECOWAS. The organization's commissioner to the political affairs was quoted by media as saying that the ECOWAS will claim a restoration of the constitutional order. He argued that the ECOWAS army chiefs meeting recently in Accra, Ghana, had agreed on the strategic objectives and the necessary equipment and reiterated the commitments of the organization's leaders to such a potential intervention. This came in response to a proposal by Niger's new leader, General Abdurrahman Tiani, to launch a dialogue and revealed a first schedule of transition, which he assured would not exceed 3 years. Meanwhile, the UNICEF warned against the worsening of the humanitarian situation in Niger and stressed that over 2 million people were in need of humanitarian aid.
The Trade Ministry said in a press release that the Algerian stand in South Africa as part of the 15th BRICS summit has been remarkably well attended by visitors. The BRICS exhibition, organized as part of the BRICS summit, is intended to provide a platform for companies from member states and invited countries, notably the African ones, to showcase their products and services. South Africa, which holds the presidency of the group this year, is holding the 15th summit in Johannesburg until Thursday. Finance Minister Al-Aziz Fayed is representing President of the Republic at the forum BRICS Outreach Plus as part of the 15th session of BRICS Summit in Johannesburg.
Algeria's participation in this forum reflects the importance granted by the authorities to enhance the equal and fair pluralism, to improve the world's governance and find solutions to multidimensional crises.
Let's recall that the BRICS Summit is being held in Johannesburg until the 24th of August. The summit meeting of the so-called BRICS group, bringing together Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, today opened in Johannesburg to examine political and economic issues and the extension of the group to include new members. More on the summit with Asia Bika.
South Africa confirmed last month the participation of the heads of state of the 5 emerging economies, namely President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva of Brazil, Chinese President Xi Jinping and the host country's President Cyril Ramaphosa. India will be represented by its Prime Minister, whereas Russia will be represented by its Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The extension of the BRICS group to include new members will be high on the agenda of the summit meeting, placed under the theme The BRICS and Africa. In this respect, South Africa affirmed last month that several countries, including Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Egypt and Ethiopia, had already applied to adhere to the BRICS, largely by the 5 developing countries, as a counterweight to the world's economic system. Earlier, Chinese President Xi Jinping affirmed during an official visit to Pretoria ahead of the summit meeting that the event marked a historic new starting point for the relations between his country and South Africa, which he said is an influential power in a continent that has become strong considering the diplomatic stakes.
The Speaker of the National People's Assembly, Mr. Brahim Boughali, has held talks in Tehran with the Iranian Foreign Minister, Mr. Hossein Amir Abdullahian. During the talks held in the presence of Algiers' ambassador to Tehran, Ali Arouj, the two sides evoked the Algerian-Iranian relations and the recent diplomatic dynamic, in particular the latest visit by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community, Mr. Ahmed Attaf. In this connection, the Iranian official recalled the discussions with his Algerian counterpart, which focused mainly on topics of common interest, in particular the imperative need to promote economic relations. In this context, Mr. Boughali highlighted the change that Algeria is undergoing under the leadership of the President of the Republic and the new direction of the economy and investment. Emphasizing parliamentary relations and the importance of strengthening them, Mr. Boughali stressed that the visit was part of an exchange of parliamentary expertise and experience to consolidate common positions on regional and international issues in accordance with the principles of respect, dialogue, coexistence, and the peaceful resolution of conflicts, in addition to support of just causes, in particular those of Palestine and Western Sahara. Mr. Boughali also spoke of the imperative need to activate the role of the Parliamentary Union of Member States of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to defend the sacred symbols of Islam and fight against attacks on them, citing the repetitive criminal act of burning the Holy Quran. 14 hours, 40 minutes Algiers time. We're coming live to you from the capital Algiers. This is Radio Algeria International. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh has called on the international community, right institutions and organizations to break the silence over the crimes daily carried out by the Israeli occupying authorities against the Palestinian people. He stressed that such a silence encouraged the Israeli occupying forces to carry on their acts of aggression, including the recent killing of one Palestinian youngster in a municipality south of Jenin. This came as the Palestinian Foreign Ministry called on the international community and the United States to intervene rapidly to stop Israel's violations and pave the way for a return to the negotiating table in fulfillment of UN resolutions. It rejected the continued violence waged by the Israeli soldiers and by the Jewish settlers against the Palestinians, their houses and properties in the West Bank. In this connection, 47 Palestinians were arrested during operations carried out today by the Israeli army in various parts of the West Bank, including Hebron, Ramallah, and occupied Jerusalem. The UN Security Council is holding today an open briefing followed by private consultations on the situation in Libya. Asya Bikar.
Special Representative and Head of the UN Support Mission in Libya, Abdoulaye Bathily, will brief on the latest political, security and humanitarian developments in the country. Additionally, the chair of the 1970 Libya Sanctions Committee, Japanese Kimihiro Ishikano, will present the periodic report on the committee's activities. A representative of the civil society is also expected to make a presentation. Bathily is expected to update the Council on recent efforts to facilitate an agreement on a new roadmap for national elections to unify the country's government. The report of the UN Security Council said that members of the UN Security Council are expected to take note of the approval of the House of Representatives in Libya on the election draft bill, while highlighting the importance of reaching a political settlement on the controversial points. The UN Security Council also hailed the mediation of Bathily in this regard. The Security Council said it will always back an inclusive process in Libya and ensure the holding of elections in Libya to bring back security and political and economic stability to the country.
Still with our African news, the Sudanese government has been alerting the international community to the terrorist and criminal nature of the rebel militia, represented by the use of civilians as human shields, the targeting of unarmed citizens, especially women and children, sexual violence, and the recruitment of child fighters. It puts the rebel militia at the same level as ISIS group Boko Haram and the Ugandan Lord's Army movement, which the international community has classified as terrorist groups that threaten international and regional security. The attempt of a suicide attack by the rebel militia in Khartoum, in which large numbers of children and minors were employed as fighters, revealed that the militia has no human, moral, or religious values and does not abide by the standards of international humanitarian law or even common human sense. This came at a time when there are frequent reports of the militia's kidnapping of large numbers of girls and women, their use of forced labor, and their exposure to rape, sexual violence, and detention in order to obtain large sums of money from their families as ransom. This was referred to the statement of UN experts and rapporteurs last week, including the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, the Special Rapporteur on Sexual Assault, and the Special Rapporteur on Human Trafficking. The non-governmental organization Save the Children has reported that at least 500 children have died of hunger in Sudan during 4 months of conflict, with potentially hundreds more casualties. The details with Asya Bikar.
The organization's director in Sudan, Araf Noor, has warned in a statement that children were dying of hunger when it could have been entirely prevented. In May, the factory that produced 60% of children's nutritional supplements was destroyed. The situation is expected to worsen as the organization was forced to halt its activity amid fighting, and it has been unable to resume treating 31,000 malnourished children. Humanitarian workers who have been prevented from entering or moving within the country or have been reiterated that they have received only 27% of their required funding. On the ground, violence continued today, especially in Khartoum and Darfur in the west of the country. The battles in the region have centered on Nyala, the capital of South Darfur state, where since August 11 there have been 60 dead, 250 wounded and 50,000 displaced, according to the United Nations. While fighting prevents aid-laden trucks from reaching their destinations, the Turkish hospital, the only one still operating in Nyala, stated that it is receiving a large number of patients beyond its capacity.
An Iranian military delegation has arrived in Moscow to discuss cooperation between Iranian and Russian ground forces. The two sides discussed issues of military cooperation and interaction aimed at the implementation of projects that are supposed to improve the combat readiness of both countries' armed forces. Russian Ground Forces Commander Army General Oleg Selyukov said Iran is a strategic partner for Russia. Russia and Iran, both under Western economic sanctions, have forged closer relations in military and other areas since Moscow sent tens of thousands of troops into Ukraine. The West has accused Iran of selling large numbers of drones for use against Ukraine, something Tehran denies. U.S. former President Donald Trump will appear before the Court of Atlanta next Thursday following his alleged attempts to reverse the presidential election results in the state of Georgia in 2020. Trump, who is campaigning to run for a new mandate, remains the Republicans' favorite according to surveys. Authorities have given him until Friday to appear before the Court of Atlanta. His appearance before court will come a day after the first TV broadcast debate between the main Republican candidates. Donald Trump was indicted in 3 other cases related to elections fraud. Now back to Algeria. The startup Assista Soin, specialized in the field of digital healthcare, will represent Algeria at the World Entrepreneurship Summit due to be held in Chile between the 14th and 18th of April. The startup Assista Soin, which provides home-based services, was elected following a contest that took place at the Higher Science Institute in Bourg-el-Kifan here in Algiers. And now, next, our weekly broadcast, Health Magazine.
Hello and welcome to this new edition of your weekly program, The Health Magazine, during which we will shed light on a very common health issue that affects many children around the world. Most kids have an excess of energy at times, but the main question is how often do you have to tell your child to slow down, stop interrupting, or stay still? Hyperactivity is a classic sign of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. It also occurs with other conditions. Hyperactivity means having increased movement, impulsive actions, and a shorter attention span, and being easily distracted. Attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, is marked by an ongoing pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity, impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development. People with ADHD experience an ongoing pattern of the following types of symptoms. Inattention means a person may have difficulty staying on task, sustaining focus, and staying organized, and these problems are not due to defiance or lack of comprehension. Hyperactivity means a person may seem to move about constantly, including in situations when it is not appropriate, or excessively fidgets, taps, or talks. In adults, hyperactivity may mean extreme restlessness or talking too much. Impulsivity means a person may act without thinking or have difficulty with self-control. Impulsivity could also include a desire for immediate rewards or the inability to delay gratification. An impulsive person may interrupt others or make important decisions without considering long-term consequences. The signs of hyperactivity are hard to miss, and they often prompt negative reactions from other people. Until you know the reason behind the behaviors, you may find yourself getting annoyed and thinking that your child is just acting out. But if your child has ADHD, his overactivity is caused by differences in how the brain works. Here are some behaviors that are common with hyperactivity. Talks almost constantly and frequently interrupts others, moves from place to place quickly and often clumsily, keeps moving even when sitting down, bumps into things, fidgets and has to pick up everything and play with it, has trouble sitting still for meals and other quiet activities. Now, what could be the cause of hyperactivity? ADHD is a frequent cause of hyperactivity in children, but it's not the only possible cause. Other conditions can cause kids to move around and talk too much, just for different reasons. Here are some of the issues you may want to read up on and talk about with your child's doctor. Let's explain a bit more what does ADHD mean. ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is a chronic condition marked by persistent inattention, hyperactivity, and sometimes impulsivity. ADHD affects children and teens and can continue in adulthood. ADHD is the most commonly diagnosed mental disorder for children. Children with ADHD may be hyperactive and unable to control their impulses, or they may have trouble paying attention. These behaviors interfere with school and home life. It's more common in boys than in girls. It's usually discovered during the early school years when a child begins to have problems paying attention. Adults with ADHD may have trouble managing time, being organized, setting goals, and holding down the job. They may also have problems with relationships, self-esteem, and addiction. We should also emphasize that being hyperactive doesn't just mean zooming around the room. Kids may fidget or have extra movements even when doing little things like tying their shoes, writing, or playing an instrument. Kids with ADHD also tend to be impulsive and have trouble paying attention. ADHD may look different at different ages. For example, a preschooler might be accident-prone, while a grade schooler might not be able to sit still long enough to finish his work. Anxiety disorder. Anxiety can make kids restless and unable to focus. Those symptoms sometimes lead people to mistake it for ADHD. It's not uncommon for a child to have both conditions at the same time, however. Hyperthyroidism. Kids rarely have this condition, but when they do, it can cause them to fidget and lack focus. It also often involves eye issues like an irritation or bulging. Inner ear disorders. Kids with inner ear problems are often hyperactive. These kids' need for constant motion may be caused by their hearing and balance disorders. Sensory processing issues. Kids with sensory processing issues can become hyperactive when they are overstimulated or understimulated. How to cope with hyperactivity. Getting to the bottom of your child's hyperactivity is a process that may take a few steps. A good way to start is by observing your child and taking notes. Having these notes will be helpful when you talk to a professional about your concerns, and it may help you get answers more quickly. Here is what you can do to understand what's behind your child's hyperactivity. Talk to your child's teacher. Hyperactivity can affect learning. That's why it's a good idea to reach out to your child's teacher. Together, you can talk about classroom strategies that can help, such as using a secret signal to cue your children to stay on task. Look into an educational evaluation. If you think your child's hyperactivity is affecting his learning, you or your child's teacher can request that the school evaluates him. Depending on the results, your child may be able to get services and supports to meet his needs. That might include things like taking breaks during tests or taking tests in a separate room, where there will be fewer distractions. Talk to your child's doctor. This is also a good place to start. Bring your notes with you to the visit and share your concerns. The doctor may want to rule out hyperthyroidism and other possible medical causes of your child's hyperactivity. There are some questions you're likely to be asked to get a better sense of what's going on. They may include things like how long you've been seeing this behavior, whether it's getting worse, and whether the teacher sees it too. The doctor may also recommend a psychological evaluation to look at how your child thinks and to assess whether he has ADHD or anxiety or both. Talk to specialists. You may be referred to more than one specialist to get to the bottom of your child's hyperactivity. An audiologist would look for hearing problems. A neurologist, psychiatrists, or developmental behavioral pediatrician would look for brain-based medical issues including ADHD, and a psychiatrist or psychologist would diagnose anxiety disorders. Professionals who can prescribe medications for these issues include your child doctor, a psychiatrist, a neurologist, or a physician's assistant. See a private learning specialist. ADHD can have a big effect on your child's learning. A psychologist can do an evaluation to see what the impact is and if any learning issues are at play. The tests are the same as what they use in a school evaluation. Tutors can help kids develop strategies to keep ADHD from getting in the way of their learning, but tutors not perform formal evaluations. What you can do now to help your kid. Even if you don't get an evaluation, there are many things you can do to find support. There are also strategies you can try to help your child manage his behavior. Just remember to pace yourself. Trying too many at once can make it hard to figure out which ones are working the best for your child and for you. Here are some suggestions. Learn as much as you can. Understanding your child's hyperactivity is the first step to getting him the help he needs. The more you know, the better able you'll be to find ways to help him gain self-control skills. Observe and take notes. By observing your child's behavior, you may be able to spot patterns and triggers. Maybe his activity level rises as the night wears on, or perhaps he has a hard time falling asleep and is overtired. Recognizing the trigger allows you to try different strategies like changing his bedtime routine to have more quiet time and get a full night's sleep. Provide things to fidget with. Let your child chew gum, carry a stress ball, or have some other object to fiddle with. It can help direct some of the overactivity and cut down on your child picking up and playing with other items. Consider martial arts or yoga classes. Physical activities give your child an outlet for his energy. These can also teach your child to be aware of his movement and be in control of his body. Try different strategies. For new ideas on dealing with behavior issues, check out the expert advice in Parenting Coach. You might find helpful tips for handling your energetic child. Connect with other parents. Knowing you're not the only family out there dealing with hyperactivity can make a big difference. Connect with parents in similar situations and share information and advice. It can be a great source of support. Understanding more about what's going on with your child can help you start to get out in front of his behavior issues rather than always reacting to it. Looking at your child's strengths, finding support for yourself, and changing things a little at a time can make both of you feel more confident and in control. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the Health Magazine. Do join us next week for a fresh edition of our program. Until then, have a good time and take care.
This is Radio Algeria International, the all-news channel broadcasting around the clock and in real time.